Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chel Gimel, and Amir Hashem. Today we will be learning Daf Kuf Beis Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today on Daf Kuf Aleph Amud Beis, really 2 lines off the bottom in the Shulchan Aruch by the words of the Ramah Hagah. Okay, but we're going to give a brief recap because this Sif Katan Hay is such an important Sif Katan in Hilchos Shabbos. We're going to give a little bit of a recap to what we saw yesterday in Sif A. Our learning should be a schos refuah shalema from Shemer ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak ben Tzion ben Dusha, Rivka bas Shira Leah, and Chava Hadassah bas Serel. Our learning should be a schos for Yonasan ben Michal and Yoel ben Michal. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over them together with all of our other brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chol Makom Shehem. So yesterday in Sifei, we began to discuss the sugya of a shvus dishvus b'makom mitzvah, a shvus dishvus b'makom tzarech harbe. The idea that the Mechaber brings up over here is Amir la'akum is an Issa D'Rabbanan. The prohibition to ask an Einu Yehudi to perform something for you that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, that's an Issa D'Rabbanan. Amir la'akum is an Issa D'Rabbanan. Now, a shvus d'shvus is a double D'Rabbanan. Where do you have a shvus d'shvus? Well, let's take a look. When you do Amir la'akum, it depends what you're asking the Einu Yehudi to do. If you're asking an Einu Yehudi to do something that's an Issa D'Oraisa, so let's say you're asking an Einu Yehudi to light a candle. Lighting a candle is an Issa D'Oraisa. If you ask an Einu Yehudi to light a candle, you're doing Amir la'akum, which it is an Issa D'Rabbanan, on an Issa D'Oraisa. So there's only one single D'Rabbanan involved over here, the D'Rabbanan of Amir la'akum. But if you ask an Einu Yehudi to do something which is only Asr Midrabbanan, then really what's going on over here is a double D'Rabbanan. The very act that you're asking the Einu Yehudi to do is only Asr Midrabbanan. It's not Asr Midaraisa. And you are asking him to do it, you're doing Amir la'akum. You're not doing the Issa D'Rabbanan. You're asking the Einu Yehudi, that's an Issa D'Rabbanan, to do an Issa D'Rabbanan. So that's a shvus d'shvus. That's a double D'Rabbanan. Says the Mechaber over here in Sifei that Amir la'akum on an Issa D'Rabbanan is mutter in certain cases. And the Mechaber lists really 3 different kinds of cases. He says it's mutter b'makom miktsas chayli. If you have somebody who's somewhat ill, and you want to ask an Einu Yehudi to do something to help that person, and you're asking him to do something that's also midrabanan, so again, it's Amir la'akum on an Issa D'Rabbanan, but you're doing it for the needs of somebody who is somewhat ill. He says another case is b'makom tzarech harbe, where there's a great need. Now the Mechaber doesn't quantify what that means, that there's a tzarech harbe. We saw in the Mishnah Berurah, the Mishnah Berurah brings down the Magen Avram, that tzarech harbe means over here b'makom hefsid gadol. If somebody's going to take a very significant financial hit, and you could prevent that financial loss by asking an Einu Yehudi to do something which is Asr Midrabbanan, then it's mutter to ask him to do it. That would be a shvus d'shvus b'makom hefsid gadol. We gave an example that I quoted from Reb Simcha Bunim Cohn's Sefer, where he said, what happens if your freezer becomes unplugged on Shabbos, and you have hundreds of dollars of food in that freezer? If everything defrosts, you're going to take a significant financial hit. To ask an Einu Yehudi to plug the freezer back in, that's asking the Einu Yehudi to do something which is only Asr Midrabbanan. So here you have a case where to do Amir la'akum and ask him to plug the freezer in would be a shvus d'shvus b'makom tzarech harbe. It's a hefsid gadol. So Rabbi Bunim Cohen writes that would be mutter. And then finally, the Mechaber gives another case where this would be mutter, and that is b'makom mitzvah. If you want to ask an Ein Yehudi to do an Isid Rabbanon in order to facilitate the performance of a mitzvah, so again, that's Amir La'akum, a Shvus. It's a Shvus de Shvus. It's an Amir La'akum on asking the Ein Yehudi to do something which is only Aseh B'Drabanan, B'Makom Mitzvah, to facilitate the performance of a mitzvah. So if it's pitch black and you want to be able to sit down and learn Torah Friday night, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that's certainly a mitzvah. You want to do Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan, you want to ask the Ein Yehudi, McClaren, if you, well, the truth is maybe that's not the best example that I could have given, because we have to question whether or not turning on the light is an Issa D'Rabbanan or an Issa D'Oraisa. It's going to depend what kind of bulb you have. If it's an incandescent bulb, so you have a wire that's a filament that's glowing and it produces heat, that could very well be a D'Oraisa. An LED is probably a D'Rabbanan. But if you have, if you want to ask an Ein Yehudi to do an Issa D'Rabbanan to facilitate the performance of a mitzvah, so that would be a Shvus de Shvus b'Makom Mitzvah. That is also something that would be mutter. How about Amir La'akum on a D'Oraisa? Amir La'akum on a D'Oraisa is aser even in these cases. So over there, we could give a very solid example of the fellow who wants to sit down and learn Torah. Somebody wants to sit down and learn Torah Friday night, and he wants to ask an Ein Yehudi to light a candle. Lighting a candle is an Issa D'Oraisa. So that's not a Shvus de Shvus. That's a single D'Rabbanan. You want to do Amir La'akum on a D'Oraisa. That's a single D'Rabbanan. Amir La'akum on a D'Oraisa is also even b'Makom Mitzvah. Mishnah Berurah brings that down very clearly over here in Ice Cotton Yud Tes. In Ice Cotton Yud Tes, he says very clearly, Aval davar she'isurai min HaTorah aser al yedei ein Yehudi afilu l'dvar mitzvah. Now the Mishnah Berurah, the Ramah is going to bring down a shita that says not that way, but we'll see that. Now, why is it that Amir La'akum on the D'Rabbanan is mutter in these cases? So the Mishnah Berurah in Ice Cotton Chaf says the reason is lo gazru ba'ifanim elu. Since Amir La'akum is only a din D'Rabbanan, the Gzeira D'Rabbanan, the Chazal did not make this Gzeira b'Makom Miktsas Chayli. They didn't make this Gzeira when it's a Tzarech Harbe, when it's a Hefsid Meruba. They didn't make this Gzeira b'Makom Mitzvah. They didn't make the Gzeira. So therefore, Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan is mutter in such cases. Finally, the Mechaber brought down a more machmer opinion. He brought down the Shitas Taisvis, the Yesh Oisrin. There are those that say that Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan is aser, even in all of these cases. That Shitas Taisvis. Shitas Taisvis says you can't bring a raya from the Gemara in Erevin by heating up water, by having a Nachri carry water for the needs of a baby, that Shvus de Shvus b'Makom Mitzvah is mutter. He says that's talking only about the mitzvah of Mila. The mitzvah of Mila is different because Mila itself is Doicha Shabbos. So over there we could say that the Shvus de Shvus b'Makom Mila is mutter, but we can't bring a raya from the mitzvah of Mila to anywhere else. That's really what we saw yesterday. Now let's go to the Ramah. It says the Ramah, 2 lines off the bottom, Hagah. Ulekamon Siman Tuf Kaf Pei Vav Pasak Lahatir. Later on in Siman Tuf Kuf Pei Vav, we're going to see that the Mechaber paskins like the first opinion over here, that Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan is mutter in all of these cases. V'ayin la'el simin reish ayin vav diyesh b'kila nafilu b'malacha da'araisa. He says, take a look. Earlier we learned this at simin reish ayin vav. There are those that are makel even on Amir La'akum on a da'araisa b'Makom Mitzvah, and that's what we saw earlier in Reish Ayin Vav, the Madiyarmrim that say you're allowed to ask an Ein Yehudi to light a ner, which is an Issa D'Oraisa, in order to facilitate Einig Shabbos, to facilitate eating Su'uda Shabbos. You have a pitch black room, you want to sit down to eat the Su'uda, you're going to ask an Ein Yehudi to light a ner. And there are those that say that that's mutter, V'ayin Sham Sif Gimel. We had over here, well, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says in Ice Cotton Chav Daled, Afilu b'malacha da'araisa. There is a shita that is mater amir la'akum even on a daraisa al yidei ein Yehudi b'makom mitzvah. Miu kvar kasav Ramah le'el. We already had the Ramah said in Siman Reish Ayin Vav Yesh lahachmir bazeh, that we should be machmir and we should not do amir la'akum on a daraisa even b'makom mitzvah v'chein ikar. And the Mishnah Berurah brings down over here from the Taz and other achrayim that is the ikar halacha. We should be machmir. And we paskin that amir la'akam on a daraisa is usher even b'makom mitzvah kideya zu hi rak das yechida. Because this opinion that amir la'akam on a daraisa is mutter b'makom mitzvah, says the Mishnah Berurah, is a das yechida. It's a singular opinion. V'arish, v'arif, v'arosh, v'arambam, v'oid kama gedolei rishonim cholkin aleh. The Rif, the Rambam, other Rishonim argue on that shita, and therefore we do not paskin that way. Now the Mishnah Berurah earlier in Ois Katan Chav Gimel told us in the name of the Lavush and the Eliyah Rabbah that as far as the two shitas that the Mechaber brings down here in Sif Hey, the Mekel opinion that says that Amir la'akam on a derabanan is mutter in these cases, and then the second opinion, the Yesh Oisrin, that says Amir la'akam on a derabanan is usher even in these cases. The Mishnah Berurah brought down the Eliyah Rabbah and the Lavush, who say very clearly that we paskin like the Deir Rishona, we paskin that Amir la'akam on a derabanan is mutter in these cases. Continues the Mishnah Berurah Kuf Chaf Amud Aleph. V'achel inyan mila mitzadei the Magen Avram lekaman b'simin shin lamed aleph lisbay chaldei azu. The Magen Avram does say that when it comes to the mitzvah of bris milah, you could rely on the opinions that say that amir la'akam on a daraisa is mutter. V'ayin be'eliyah Rabbah sham. V'dan, you should know, says the Mishnah Berurah, Dema dekaima lan amir la'eni Yehudi shvus. When we say that amir la'akum is itself a derabanan, Hu afilu im omer le'eni Yehudi sheyomer le'eni Yehudi acher lasois la malacha b'Shabbos. What the Mishnah Berurah is saying is like this: we are putting forth the concept over here that a double derabanan is mutter in certain cases. It's mutter b'makom mitzvah. It's mutter b'makom hefsid gadol. It's mutter b'miktas chayli. It's mutter by somebody who's suffering. You want to alleviate somebody's suffering. A double derabanan is mutter. So, for example, another beautiful example that Rav Simcha Bunim Cohen put into his sefer. Let's say you have somebody who has a burn, and he's suffering from the pain of the burn, and you want to send somebody to the pharmacy to go pick up some cream to be able to get onto his some ointment to get onto his burn to alleviate his pain. Now, going and picking up the ointment is an issa d'Rabbanan. Let's say there's no Erev. So carrying it is going to be Issa D'Rabbanan, provided that he's not carrying in a real bona fide Rishus Harabim. Making the purchase is an Issa D'Rabbanan. Well, as far as how you're going to put the ointment on to avoid the Issa D'Araisa of Memachik, etc., we'll have to deal with that. But you want to send an Eini Yehudi to go pick up the ointment. So you want to do Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan. Says Rav Simcha Bunim Cohen, he brings down, that's a perfect example of Amir La'akum in the case of somebody who's suffering. You want to alleviate his suffering. So we have this idea that Amir La'akum on the D'Rabbanan is mutter in these cases. Why? Because it's a double D'Rabbanan. The Amira to the Akum is a D'Rabbanan, and you're only asking him to do a D'Rabbanan. So how about the following case? We could create a double D'Rabbanan another way. What we'll do is like this. We'll ask Tony, do me a favor. You go and ask Vinny to go do something. So my Amira to Tony is a D'Rabbanan. And what am I asking Tony to do? I'm asking Tony to make an Amira to Vinny. So l'chayr, it's a double D'Rabbanan. So now, how about if I want to ask Tony to ask Vinny to do an Issa D'Araisa b'makom mitzvah? Oh, I'll give you an example. I want to sit down and I want to learn Torah Friday night. That's a mitzvah. It's pitch black in the room, but there's a candlestick. I want to ask somebody to light the nair. So to ask one Eini Yehudi, to ask Tony to light the nair, we said is also. Because I'm asking Tony to do an Issa D'Araisa. That's Amir La'akam on a D'Araisa. That's also even b'makom mitzvah. But I'll make it a double d'Rabbanan. I'll ask Tony to go ask Vinny to light the nair. So now it's a shvus to shvus. It's a double d'Rabbanan. I'm not asking Tony to do an issa d'araisa. I'm asking Tony to do an issa d'Rabbanan of Amir al-Akum. Right? I'm asking Tony, you ask Vinny. So l'chayr it's a double d'Rabbanan. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no, that wouldn't work. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is saying here. It says like this, V'da, you should know. When we say that Amir al-Akum is an issa d'Rabbanan, hu afilu, it remains an issa d'Rabbanan, even im omer le'eni Yehudi, if you ask one eni Yehudi, sheyomer le'eni Yehudi acher, to go ask a second eni Yehudi, lasais loy malacha b'Shabbos, to go perform an issa d'araisa. Malacha over here means an issa d'araisa on Shabbos. It's still considered a single d'Rabbanan. The reason for that pashtus is because we don't look at it that you're asking the first eni Yehudi to do Amira la'akum to the second Eini Yehudi. We look at it as one Amira to the second Eini Yehudi. You're appointing the second Eini Yehudi as your agent to go ahead and light the fire. Just instead of talking directly to him, you're talking to him through somebody else. But we don't look at that as a double d'Rabbanan. The Mishnah Berurah brings this down from Agan Moreno or Rav Gershon Balavodus HaGershuni. V'achavis yoyer b'siman nun gimel mitzadet lakel bazeh. The chavis yoyer has a different opinion. He says no, you could be mekel, and you could consider that a double d'Rabbanan. V'choshkein b'davar she'enoi elo mishum shvus. Certainly, if the final malacha that's going to be done is not an issa d'araisa and it's an issa d'Rabbanan, then it's certainly okay. V'ayin b'sefer HaChaim shekasav d'b'makom hefsid gadol yesh bismay chalamakilin. When you're dealing with a hefsid gadol, then the Mishnah Berurah brings down from the Sefer HaChaim that you could rely on this chavas yoyer, that going through two Einam Yehudim would be considered a shvus to shvus. Over there in Sif Katan Yod Aleph, the Mishnah Berurah spoke about in the final analysis, if an Eini Yehudi does malacha on your behalf on Shabbos, are you allowed to get hana from that malacha on Shabbos or not? It's a little bit funny to figure out specifically how to apply what he says in Sif Katan Yod Aleph to over here, because over here we're being matir amira a shvus to shvus b'makom mitzvah. We're being matir it so that you could get hana from the end result, right? There's no, if we're going to answer the end result, then there's no reason to do this whole thing. Okay. All right, so this again, a very yesodistic Sif Katan in Hilchos Shabbos, this shaila of Amira la'akum on a d'Rabbanan. It has all sorts of different ramifications. So, for example, a worthwhile shaila would be if it's during the summer and it's sweltering outside, and there was a blackout and your air conditioning got shut off, and now it's 100 degrees inside your house, and you want to sit down and eat Suda Shabbos, and you simply, you're not going to be able to enjoy your Suda Shabbos with the air conditioning off. Are you allowed to ask an Eini Yehudi to turn on your air conditioner or not? Pashtus, that's an issa d'Rabbanan. I'm not giving out a psak over here. What I'm telling you is that this is a worthwhile shaila to go ask your Rav. Could I ask an Eini Yehudi to turn on the air conditioner for the mitzvah of Suda Shabbos? Another example, you have orchim. Somebody's making a simcha in the community, and you're putting up orchim in your house. Hachdasas orchim is a mitzvah, and it's a mitzvah to treat your orchim properly. And something went wrong, and the air conditioning is off in your guest suite, and your orchim are not going to be able to sleep. Could you ask an Eini Yehudi to turn on the air conditioning for your guests in your guest suite? There's lots of shilas that come up in exactly these type of scenarios where you want to ask an Eini Yehudi to do something that is not an Issa D'Araisa. Now remember, this is not a flat heter. It's not that Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan is always mutter. Chas v'shalom. Amir La'akum on a D'Rabbanan is mutter under certain circumstances. It's mutter to benefit somebody who's somewhat ill. It's mutter to alleviate somebody's suffering. It's mutter b'makom mitzvah. It's mutter b'makom hefsid gadol. But whenever you have any kind of these extenuating circumstances, it is very worthwhile to analyze what exactly is it that you're asking the Eni Yehudi to do. Are you asking the Eni Yehudi to do something which is an Issa Daraisa? If you're asking the Eni Yehudi to do something which is an Issa Daraisa, you have a real problem. That you can't do. But if you're asking an Eni Yehudi to do something which is only an Issa Darabanan, then very often there are grounds to be makel. And there are times that it is mutter, and you should go and you should ask a shayla. Okay, moving along now to Siv Vav, bottom line of Kuf Aleph Amud Beis. We have a lot to do. Let's see how much we can get through. Says the Mechaber Siv Vav. Going back to questions of Mimtzoi Cheftzecha V'Daber Dover, we kind of interrupted our regularly scheduled broadcasting for this discussion of Amira La'akum. Now we're kind of moving back more into Mimtzoi Cheftzecha V'Daber Dover, pursuing your own non-Shabbos pursuits on Shabbos, and speaking about things that are usher on Shabbos. Says the Mechaber Siv Vav, Asr l'chashev cheshbonos, you're not allowed to make calculations. Afilu im avru, even if you're making calculations about things that have already taken place. They're in the past. Kigoyin, for example, says the Mechaber. You want to sit down and you want to make a cheshbon, you want to make a calculation. Kach v'kach hoitzesi al davar ploni. I spent so and so much on this expenditure. So you're not calculating how much money you're going to spend in the future. You see, if you're calculating how much money you're going to spend on something, that's probably Mimtzai Cheftzecha. You're having a business discussion. It's definitely Daber Davar. You're speaking about spending money on business expenditures on Shabbos. That's clearly Mimtzai Cheftzecha V'Daber Davar. But how about if you're speaking about something that already took place in the past? So you're not discussing what you're going to do. You're not discussing, I'm going to do something that's usher to do on Shabbos. That's Daber Davar. This is not Daber Davar. I'm speaking about what I already did. I'm not planning. So says the Mechaber though, Asr l'chashev cheshbonos afilu im avru kigon kach v'kach yitzesi al dvar ploni. But v'dafka she'adayin schar hapayalim etzloi. But this is only true if you're still holding your workers' wages. I'll explain what he means in a moment. Aval, however, in pira'am kvar, if you already paid your workers their wages, mutter, then it is permissible. What the Mechaber is talking about is like this. You have a project running, and you pay your workers by the hour, by the day, however it is that you pay your workers. You want to sit down on Shabbos. You know, I have this crew that's working for me. They worked so and so many hours. I already paid them $5,000 on account. So I've given them already $5,000. The work is done. The work is finished. I know I paid them $5,000. So now I want to sit down and I want to make a cheshbon. How much did I spend on the workers? Says the Mechaber, it depends. If you know that you already paid them everything that they were due. So, for example, they worked for you for 6 weeks. You paid them on a weekly basis. And you know that each week you paid them everything that you owed them. So, you know that they're fully paid. Now, the project is over. Now, on Shabbos, you want to make a calculation. How much did I spend on that project? Well, you're not doing anything, so this is not Mimtzai Cheftzecha. Daber Davar, you're not talking about, I am going to pay my workers. Saying that I'm going to pay my workers, that's Daber Davar. You're saying on Shabbos that you're going to do something that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. You're not allowed to pay your workers on Shabbos. But that's not what you're doing. You know that you paid your workers everything that you owed them. What you want to do now on Shabbos afternoon after the Daf Yomi Shir is you want to sit down and you want to make a cheshbon. In week number 1, I paid them $1,000. Week number 2, I paid them $800. Week number 3, I paid them $900. Week number 5, I paid them another $1,000. And you want to make a cheshbon. How much did I pay them? How much did this project cost me in labor? Says the Mechaber, that's not Osir al Mimtzai Cheftzach V'daber Davar. That's what he means over here. Aval impra'am kvar. If you know that you already paid them everything that you owed them, mutter. Then making these cheshbonis is mutter, because there's no Mimtzai Cheftzach or Daber Davar over here. But if you did not already pay them everything you owe them, that's the first case here in the Mechaber. If you did not yet pay your workers everything that they're due, then when you sit down and you make the calculations now, what you're doing is you're figuring out how much do I still have to pay my workers. That's you're making plans of what you're going to do for your business. And you're figuring out, oh, I still have to pay my workers another $1,500. That would be usr. Let's see this inside in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Chav Hey. The Mechaber started off with the case that was first he said what's usr. He said you're not allowed to make calculations even if the calculations are in the past. Then he gave the caveat. He said that's only dafka she'adayin. It's only usr if you're still holding on to money that you have to pay your laborers. Why is it usr in that case? Because the purpose of your calculations now is to sit down and figure out how much you still have to pay your workers. So now you're making necessary calculations that have a non-Shabbos purpose. And this is usr, this is mamish straight out daber davar. You're making plans, you're making calculations, and you're discussing paying the payalim. This is true if the money is still etzloi, it's still by you. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, how about if this is what happens? How about if you sit down to make the calculations, right? Again, you don't know for sure that you paid your workers all of their due. Now you sit down to make the calculations, and you find out that you don't owe them anything. Then you'll say, wait a second, was I allowed to do this? I remember learning in the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah that making calculations is sometimes mutter, sometimes aser. You go, you look up Siman Shin Zayin, and you say, oh, Baruch Hashem, what I did was mutter, because it turned out that I don't owe the payalim any money. Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. If you weren't sure, if you paid your laborers all of their due, so you sat down and you made the cheshbonos, and then you lucked out, and it turned out that you don't owe them anything, it was still usr. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even if the end of making your calculations, it turns out that you don't owe them anything, still, since you didn't know that when you sat down to make the calculations, and therefore you needed to make these calculations for your business purposes, lakach yesh ba yisura. Now it's also, it's mimtzai cheftzach v'daber davar. You're making necessary business calculations. If you know that you paid them everything, so then there's really no purpose in the calculations that you're making. It's time. You want to know. You want to have an idea. You want to know how much it costs you. Now, by the way, this does get a little bit complicated. If there's another business need to know the answer, if you want to know how much you spent on the laborers because you have to decide how much money is left in the budget for this project and how much you could still spend on advertising, then it's still usher. Because there's still a mimtzai cheftzach v'daber davar component. It's not just stam, I just curious, how much did I spend? No, there's a necessary business component, then it's still usher. Aval, im gam et pila ha'yedeh she'en megia lehem mimenu klum, have a cheshbon shama bekach. That's the key here. If the only reason you're doing this is because it's cheshbon shama bekach, it's just, I'm curious, how much did I end up spending? People told me I'm going to end up spending $25,000 labor on that project. I don't think I did. I'm curious, how much did I spend? So then it's cheshbon shama bekach. You're not doing it for a real purpose, so that would be mutter. Now, let's say, for you, you don't really have a need for these cheshbonos, but your friend has a need for it. So, for example, you did a extension on your house. It's over. You're enjoying it. You're eating your Suda in your newly extended dining room. Your friend has the same model house as you. He also wants to make an extension on his house. So he comes over Shabbos afternoon. How much did you spend per square? Now, for you, it's not negaya. You're done. It's over. It's in the past. But your friend wants to know how much you spend per square because he wants to know how much he's going to end up spending per square. And he wants to make plans. He wants to sit down with his wife and say, could we extend the dining room and the kitchen? Could we renovate the whole kitchen? So there's a tzorich for him. If you're making the calculations for your chaver's benefit, Aser, that is also Aser. So we had the case over here where it's mutter to make the cheshbonis. Again, what's that case? Where it's cheshbonis shama bekach. You paid your workers. You know you paid your workers in full. You just want to figure out what did you spend. Then the Mechaber said mutter. Says the Mishnah Berurah mutter. Very important Mishnah Berurah. Says the Chavetz Chaim. Cause of a Rambam. You got to be medayik in the words of the Rambam HaKadosh. You have to take a look how the Rambam, the Klausenberger Rebbe, used to say that all of the words of the Rishonim were written by Ashpas HaKolmus. What does Ashpas HaKolmus mean? Klausenberger Rebbe, literally the words mean the influence of the pen. The Klausenberger Rebbe goes to great detail to explain what Ashpas HaKolmus means. He says Ashpas HaKolmus means that the Rishon, the Rambam, the Rashba, the Ran, the Rif, the Rishon sat down and learnt the Sugya B'chol Koichai, putting all of his blood, sweat, and tears into learning the Sugya and drawing the conclusions that he could conclude. But when he sat down to write, he took the pen and he had in his mind a name of Hashem, and the pen wrote. So the words that the Rishon wrote, says Klausenberger Rebbe, are all written Baruch HaKodesh. Those are not just stam words. Those are words of Nevuah Kamat. Those are words written Baruch HaKodesh. So you have to be medayik in every ois kodesh of a Rambam. Take a look at a Chavetz Chaim over here, is medayik in a Rambam. Because of a Rambam, the Rambam writes, Cheshboinoi she'ein behem tzorich, calculations that you really don't have any need for, to just curiosity, mutter l'chashbon. You're allowed to make such calculations. And the Rambam gives a case, Ketzad. Kama sa'in tfuah hayulanu b'shana pleinis. A farmer is curious, how much wheat did I grow in 2017? He takes out the ledgers and he wants to take a look. How much wheat did he? He's not trying to figure out, to plan. This year is going to be similar to 2017 because I decided I'm using the same pieces of land that I used in 2017. No, that's not what he's doing. He's just curious. He's sitting and schmoozing with his kids, and I remember 2017 was a bumper crop. I wonder how much I produced that year. I remember. It was really a good year. So he wants to sit down and make the cheshbonos. That's mutter, says the Rambam. Kama san tfuah hayulanu b'shana pleinis. Kama dinarin haitzenu b'chasanus b'neinu. How much did we spend on Yankel's wedding? Again, you're not planning because now you're making Avremel's chasana. So you want to know, how much did I spend on Yankel's chasana so I could plan where I'm getting the money from for Avremel's chasana? No, you're just curious. I remember that was a beautiful chasana. How much did we spend? Kach v'kach cheloisav shel melech. Somebody wants to sit down and figure out the size of the king's army. Oh, I know that he has 20,000 troops there and he has 5,000 troops there. He's not making plans. He's not a general. The keyoytze be'elu. Similar things, says the Rambam. Shehein sicha betela. Shehein bem tzarech klal. Essentially, this is idle chatter. This is not stuff that there's no memtzach heftzach over here. It's this idle chatter. That's mutter. Ad kan dvarav. Those are the words of the Rambam. Says the Chavetz Chaim, he brings down the Magid Mishnah. Perisha Magid Mishnah. The Magid Mishnah looks at this Rambam, and he's medayik in the Rambam. Says the Magid Mishnah. The Ramaz Lanu, the Rambam is hinting to us here, limnoya mizeh, to restrain yourself from doing this. Yeah, it's mutter, because it's cheshbon shama bekach. There's no mimtzach heftzach davar. Aber mitzad sicha betela. But it's sicha betela. It's idle chatter. She'ein sicha betela roi liyirei chet. Sicha betela is not becoming to a yirei chet. A yirei chet doesn't sit around and just plepple and make idle chatter. Useless small talk, especially not on Shabbos. V'gam b'biyuri rashal kosav shafilu b'choyel eina yofa kol kach l'tamid chacham. For a tamid chacham, even during the week, it's inappropriate, sicha b'tela. But on Shabbos, even for somebody who's not a tamid chacham, sicha b'tela is inappropriate. Coming, the Maggid Mishnah says from the Rambam, Devik k'moshav leitzim u'mavadol behen limudai. This is like a moshav leitzim, and it is bittul Torah, a Rambam, a Maggid Mishnah. Okay, moving along to Sif Zayin, second line down, Kuf Beis Amud Aleph says the Mechaber, Mutter loyma lechaveroi. You're allowed to say to your friend, or the Mishnah Berurah will say to an Eini Yehudi, or to anyone else, you're allowed to say to them on Shabbos, Hanira be'einecha shetucha lamoid imi la'orev. Can you see that you'll get together with me tonight? Can you see your way to get together with me tonight? A question. Afal pi shebi toich kach mevin shetzarich loy le'erev l'sachroi. Even though it's going to be understood by the one that you're talking to that you want to hire him to work for you on Motzi Shabbos. So you've got something going on in your basement. You've got a backup in your basement. You meet the plumber in shul. You say to the plumber, Yankel, maybe we could get together tonight? Now, the plumber understands, all right, you got a plumbing problem. You don't want to talk about it on Shabbos. So, all right, I'll put on my work clothes and I'll call you right after Shabbos. Says the Mechaber, that's mutter. Aval, however, says the Mechaber, loy yoymar loy, you cannot say to him, heyein nochain imi la'orev. Be prepared to get together with me tonight. So 2 cases. One mutter, one aser. 2 different statements. The first statement is, can you see your way to getting together with me tonight? Question. That's mutter. Even though it's going to be clear to the one that you're asking that what you're really saying to him is, I need you to work for me tonight. The second case, listen, be prepared. I need you tonight. That is aser. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ois katan lamed. Nope, I'm sorry. Ois katan chav ches. Lachaveroi v'huadin la'ini Yehudi. Ois katan chav tes. Alfa pi shebitach kach. Why is this mutter, says the Mishnah Berurah? Kevan she'enim mefarish behed yarak b'derech remez l'tzarech motzei Shabbos. You're not giving him instruction. You're not telling Yankel the plumber, come to me tonight. No. You're asking him a question. Could you see getting together with me tonight? So it's like a remez. But it's not mutter because it's a remez. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hevele rak bechlal hirhur. The Mishnah Berurah says, this remains in the realm of hirhur, of thought. The mavur l'el b'siman shin vav sivches deshari. We said in Shin Vav that there's an isser of Mimtzai Cheftzecha v'daber davar, but there's no isser of hirhur. You're not allowed to go into your rental apartment and go walking around to see what needs painting. But you're allowed to sit in your living room on Shabbos and think to yourself, oh, I know that apartment is going to be, I'm going to have to put it up. I'm going to have to advertise it for rent. Oh, the living room probably needs painting. I remember I was in there a few months ago to check on something, and it looked like there was a stain on the ceiling. Hirhur, we said, is mutter. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you want to know what the difference between these 2 statements is? The first statement where you say, could you see your way to getting together with me tonight? That's not daber davar. That's not mimtzah cheftzecha. You didn't give him an instruction. You didn't make plans. You didn't tell him to make plans. You left it in the world of the theoretical. Can you see your way? You think you could see your way to get together with me tonight? And you left it up to him? We'll think about it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, that's called hirhur. V'lo yomer lo yehei nochainimi. But you can't do the second case of the Mechaber. Be prepared to get together with me. because now you're making plans. Now you're telling him beferish, this is what we're going to do. That's dibur mamish. That's daber dover. The Aruch HaShulchan expands upon this a little bit, and the Aruch HaShulchan really says what I just told you. The Aruch HaShulchan says that the second statement, which is aser, is like a tzivoy. It's like a command. You're telling him, be prepared to work with me tonight. So what does that mean? That means you're making plans to do work on Motzei Shabbos. You're talking about doing work on Motzei Shabbos. That's daber dover. Saying, could you see your way to get together with me tonight? You didn't make plans to get together. Matter of fact, you made it very clear that you're incapable of making plans. You left it up to him, and he didn't say anything. So says Aruch HaShulchan, that is mutter. Moving along. Okay, let's move along to Sif Ches. Now, the truth is that Sif Ches is a little bit complicated, and I was going to give a hakdama to Sif Ches, but then, as I was working out the hakdama that I was going to give, I realized that the Chavetz Chaim really says everything that I was going to say. So instead of doing that hakdama, what we're going to do instead is, before we even read the Mechaber, let's turn to Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Lamed. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Yochol Loimar V'chulei. Hine, Movor Bereish HaSiman, we explained in the beginning of this Siman, one of the main underpinnings of this entire Siman, which is, to davar she'asar la'asos b'Shabbos, anything that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, asar loymar she'yasez ois lamachar. You're not allowed to say that you're going to do it tomorrow. That's the isser of daber davar. The isser of daber davar is anything that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, you're not really allowed to discuss on Shabbos. You're not allowed to say that you're going to do it tomorrow. You're not allowed to talk to your friend and ask your friend to do it tomorrow. If you're not allowed to do it today, you're not allowed to discuss it today. V'ka'amar hacha. Now here in this sif, in Sif Ches, the Mechaber is going to tell us, even though on Shabbos we know that you're not allowed to travel outside of the Tchum Shabbos, so you would think you're not allowed to go outside of the Tchum on Shabbos. You're not allowed to talk about going out of the Tchum on Shabbos. You would think that that should be the halacha. You would think that would be daber davar 101. But the Mechaber here in Sif Ches is going to say not like that. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, Mikam mokai, nevertheless, muter loymar, it is permissible for one to say on Shabbos, lekrach ploini an yeholech lemachar. I am going to this and this city, which is out of the Tchum, tomorrow. So if you live in Monsey, you're allowed to say on Shabbos, I'm going to Lakewood tomorrow, even though Lakewood is definitely outside of the Tchum of Monsey. So you're in Monsey, you're not allowed to walk to Lakewood, not that you can, but you're not allowed to walk out of the Tchum of Monsey on Shabbos, but you're allowed to say on Shabbos, I'm going out of the Tchum tomorrow. Very interesting. Why is that? And the Mishnah Berurah explains, and the Mishnah Berurah over here is explaining what the Mechaber himself is going to say. Kevon da'al etzem halicha ein issa. This is a concept that we already mentioned earlier when we were learning Shin Vav. And that is that traveling outside of the Tchum is a very interesting type of Isser. Let's contrast two different Isurim. You're not allowed to make a fire on Shabbos. Making a fire on Shabbos is one of the Lamites Malachas. It's an Isser Daraisa. Is there a permissible way for you to make a fire on Shabbos? No. There's no permissible way for you to make a fire on Shabbos. Making a fire is inherently Osir on Shabbos. That's not true about going out of the Tchum. What do I mean? Let's imagine you have a city and the Tchum extends 2,000 amas beyond the border of the city, and you want to go someplace that's 4,000 amas outside of the city limits. Well, traveling 4,000 amas outside of the city limits is traveling outside of the Tchum. That's Osir. But is walking 4,000 amas inherently Osir? No. You're allowed to walk 4,000 amas, provided that it's within the Tchum. Even in the case that we're describing, okay, you want to go to a point which is 4,000 amas beyond the city limits. Well, we've learned already earlier, there's a technicality in the halachas of Tchum Shabbos called borgenin. Borgenin are little watchmen's huts. Now the halacha is, if there would be a line of borgenin, a line of watchmen's huts, if there would be one such hut every 70 amas and 4 tvachim from the city limits until the point 4,000 amas outside of the city that you want to travel to, you would be allowed to go there on Shabbos. Why? Because of those borgenin would create a situation where now that point, 4,000 amas outside of the city limits, is no longer considered outside of the city limits, because the halacha of Tchumen that we're going to learn Mitzvah Hashem in Chelik Daled is that these watchman huts that are positioned every 70 amas and 4 tvachim they have the effect of extending the city limits out as far as they go. So there is actually a way that you would be allowed to walk exactly where you want to walk on Shabbos, and it would not be forbidden. If there would be borgenin, it wouldn't be forbidden. So again, the point is, there is nothing inherently usher about the activity that you want to perform. You want to walk to that point, 4,000 amas outside of the city limits, it's usher because of a technicality. It's usher because of an external factor. It happens to be that there are no borgenin there. It happens to be that there are no homes there. Therefore, the place that you want to go to happens to be outside of the Tchum Shabbos, and you're not allowed to go there on Shabbos. But the action, the activity of walking those 4,000 amas is not inherently usher. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is saying here. He says, Kevan, dal etzam halicha ein isser. The actual act of doing the walking, of doing the traveling, is not really forbidden. Ella shemachos borgenin. The only problem is an external technicality. There are no borgenin here. And since there are no borgenin here, it happens to be outside of the Tchum Shabbos. Therefore, the Mechaber is going to say, even though you're not allowed to travel outside of the Tchum on Shabbos, you are allowed to say, I am going to that place that is outside of the Tchum tomorrow. You're allowed to say that on Shabbos, and that is not considered daber davar. It's not considered that you are discussing something on Shabbos that you're usher to do on Shabbos, because it's not inherently usher. Now the Mishnah Berurah, once we started this Mishnah Berurah, I'm going to finish it. Now the Mishnah Berurah makes a very important point that's very negeya to us. Miu, however, says the Chavetz Chaim, Aser loymar, it would be forbidden for somebody to say, Ani roichev lamachar. I'm going to ride a horse to that city tomorrow. That would be aser. Or for somebody to say, sheyelich bikaroin, that he's going to travel by wagon outside of the Tchum tomorrow. Shekarvin b'lashon Ashkenaz foreign, a wagon, a type of wagon that they called a foreign. It's a vehicle of some kind. Why is this aser? Kevan de dibura hu davar aser be'etzem. Because when you say I'm going to ride a horse, so forget the problem of Tchum. You're right. Saying that I'm going to go outside of the Tchum, that's not davar davar. Because traveling outside of the Tchum is not an inherently forbidden activity. But riding an animal is an inherently forbidden activity. So you can't say I'm going to ride a horse to that city. You can't say I'm going to travel by vehicle for our purposes. If you live in Monsey, you could say on Shabbos, I'm going to Monsey tomorrow. That you could say. But you cannot say, I'm driving to Monsey tomorrow. Because driving is usher on Shabbos. It's inherently usher to drive on Shabbos. It may even include Isuri Daraisa to drive a car on Shabbos. So you can't say on Shabbos, I'm driving to Monsey tomorrow. You can't say on Shabbos, I'm taking the Motzei Shabbos El Al flight to Eretz Yisrael tonight. Can't say that because you're not allowed to go fly by airplane on Shabbos. So you can't talk about flying by airplane. You can't talk about it on Shabbos. You can't say that I'm going to do it after Shabbos. Ve'ein moyel eitzah lazeh, says the Mishnah Berurah. There is no eitzah, there is no loophole to make driving an animal mutter on Shabbos. There's no loophole that makes driving a car mutter on Shabbos, flying an airplane mutter on Shabbos. By going outside of the tchum, there's the technicality of borganin. If there would be borganin, it would be mutter. Therefore, I could talk about it on Shabbos because I'm not talking about something that's inherently asur on Shabbos. But there is no loophole that makes driving a car mutter on Shabbos. Therefore, you can't discuss driving someplace after Shabbos on Shabbos because that's daber davar. Yirak yoymar ani hoylech lamachar. The only thing you could do is you could say, I'm going tomorrow. Now let's take a look. Against that backdrop, now we could easily see at least the beginning of Sif Ches. Let's look inside of the Mechaber, 3 lines from the top near the end of the line, says the Mechaber Sif Ches. You're allowed to say to your friend, Lekrach Ploini, to this and this city, which is located outside of the Tchum, Ani Hoylech Lamachar. I'm going there tomorrow. Even though it's also to go there today on Shabbos, but you're allowed to say on Shabbos that you're going there tomorrow. V'chein, similarly, mutter loymar loy, you're allowed to say to your friend, Leich imi lekrach ploini lamachar. Travel with me to this and this town that's outside of the Tchum tomorrow. Even though you're not allowed to do it today, but you're allowed to talk about doing it tomorrow. Why? Kevan shehayom yachalelech al yidei borganin. Because even today on Shabbos, if there were borganin extending to the point that you want to go to, it would be mutter. So it's not inherently asur. V'chein, similarly, kol kayotze bazeh, anything similar to this, sheyesh baitzad heter la'asoisei hayoim, where it's possible for the thing that you want to discuss to be mutter to do on Shabbos. You're allowed to talk to your friend and ask your friend to do it tomorrow. So long as you don't suggest that you're going to hire him to do it tomorrow. You can't talk to your friend and say, I want to hire you to go to that city that's outside of the Tchum tomorrow. Why? Because forget about the Isser of Tchum. You're not allowed to hire a worker on Shabbos, so you're not allowed to do it. Okay, so we did Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Lamed. Let's see Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Lamed Aleph. This heter hinges on the heter of borganin in the halachas of Tchum Shabbos. Pirish, what a borganin? Sukkoi shel shomrim, little watchmen's huts. Shal yidei ze yuchalelech b'Shabbos af kama milin imhei muvloim zelo zeh b'say shivim amav arbot tvachim. If you would have a line of borganin, of watchmen's huts, each one within 70 amas and 4 tfachim of the other, it would extend the tchum of the city, and you'd be allowed to walk as far as you want, even a lot of milin. Kamavur b'siman shin tzadiches, ois katan lamed beis, v'chein kol kayotze bazeh. So too says the Mechaber. Any other similar case where you want to talk about something on Shabbos that is not inherently asur, because there is a way to perform that activity on Shabbos in an oifen heter, in a way that it's permissible, you're allowed to discuss on Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah gives an example. Kigoin, for example. Sheyomer lechaveroi, you want to say to your friend, sheyavi loy lemachar michutz letchum peiros shenitlishu mikvar. You have an apple orchard. Your apple orchard is located outside of the Tchum Shabbos. You know that your friend wants apples. He likes apples. So you want to tell your friend, tomorrow I'll bring you 5 pounds of the most delicious apples you ever tasted. I have them. They're already picked off the trees. They're ready for delivery. I'll bring them to you tomorrow. Now, you can't bring them to him today. Why not? Only because of the Isser of Tchum Shabbos. The apple orchard is located outside of the Tchum. But if there were borganin going to the apple orchard, you'd be allowed to walk to the apple orchard. And if you were able to walk to the apple orchard, you would be able to get the apples and bring them back to your friend, because the apples are already picked off the trees. So you don't have to do kites there. So there's nothing. You could go get those apples and bring them back. So since it would be possible to do this in an oifen heter, lamaisa, it's not possible. Lamaisa, right now, you can't do it by oifen heter because they're located outside of the tchum. But if there were borgenin, it wouldn't be outside of the tchum. Therefore, it's okay. You're allowed to do this. You're allowed to talk about this on Shabbos. She'ein aleim iser muktzah. These pears aren't muktzah. Why aren't they muktzah? They're not muktzah because they're already picked off the trees. There's nothing muktzah about them. After efshel laviyam hayoim mitam iser tchumin umishum iser rishuyos. Even though lamaisa, you can't go get the apples and bring them to your friend today. Why? 2 reasons. First of all, they're located outside of the tchum. But second of all, also there might not be an erev. So haitzah, you're not allowed to carry them from where they are to where you are. Afilu hachi mutter loymar, you could still talk about it on Shabbos. Why? Kevin sheyesh by tzad heter. Because theoretically, there is a permissible way to do it. The ilu haya mechitzais, if there would be mechitzais, aka if there would be an erev, haya yachal laviyam, you would be able to bring them. So I'll give you another example of this. Let's say you live in a town where there's no erev. You have a delicious potato kugel in your house, and you're telling your friend about the potato kugel that you just made, and he's mamish salivating. But you can't bring him a piece of potato kugel because there's no erev, right? So you might think that you can't tell him, I'll bring you a piece of kugel tomorrow. Since it's also for you to bring him a piece of kugel today, l'chayra would be davar davar to say, I'll bring you a piece of kugel tomorrow. But according to this halacha that we're learning here in Sif Ches, it's not true. You could say, I'll bring you a piece tomorrow. Why? Because there's a tzad heter. There is a way that it would be mutter for you to bring him the kugel today, if there would be an erev. If there would be an erev, the act of bringing the kugel from your house to his house would not be aser. So since there's a tzad heter, you're allowed to talk about it on Shabbos. Ois Katan Lamed Gimel. The Mechaber said, in such cases, you could also instruct your friend that he should do something tomorrow that has a tzad heter to be done today. Mishnah Berurah just reminds us, V'la asoise hayoim, to say to your friend that he should do it today, Asar afilu la'ena Yehudi loymar. You wouldn't even allowed to do Amir la'akum and ask an Eina Yehudi to do something like this today. You wouldn't be allowed to turn to an Eina Yehudi and tell the Eina Yehudi, go out of the tchum today, go to Muncie, go walk out of the tchum today. That, even though it has tzad heter, so what? L'maisa now it's also. If I feel it with the Yevet and Hevi b'chutz l'tchum, also l'shtamish b'hem. If an Eina Yehudi brought you something from outside of the tchum, you're not allowed to use it on Shabbos. Ukidol kaman b'simin shin chav hey sif ches. Okay, I think we're going to have to stop over here because we're already going pretty long. We'll pick up tomorrow, Yirtzeh Hashem, 4 lines off the bottom, middle of the line in the Mechaber by the word aval. Okay? Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Discuss of limud HaTorah should be making God's Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Shalom should send Yeshua Sephorus Parnasset Sheduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek. B'meherav Yameinu Amen. Be well.